the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 20, the 2023 African Cup. This episode is part 2 on the players of Mozambique final selections. Here we go. Hello and welcome back to the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. We are back for part 2 of our mediacast on the players of the 2023 African Cup. This episode deals with the final selection of Mozambique. In part 1, we compiled a list of players and their likelihood of reaching the squad. That was based mostly on their participation, usually over the past 2 years, but we did consider a couple of other factors as well. We actually ran out of time to do part 2 for some of the teams of the African Cup. So today we're going back to review that and complete the collection, as it were. The tournament has been played by this point, but we are going to take the perspective of just before the tournament here, as if we were doing the media cast when we intended to. This media cast is divided into 3 sections. Section 1 is some preliminary information, including a look at the games played recently. Section 2 is the main part of the media cast, a review of the lineup that was released, which we'll compare with the list that we compiled in part 1. And in section 3, we will just summarize new players, surprise selections, non-selections, and injury information. And then we will end with a revised list of who we think are going to be the starters. Just a quick word on our future plans. In the fall of 2024, we had hoped to review qualification for World Cup and other tournaments like the next African Cup, which is at the end of 2025. We were a bit ambitious there time-wise, and we're going to have to put that off until 2025. But stay tuned. We're hoping to review qualification in the spring and summer of 2025, and we'll actually release a video when we've decided what we can do. Okay, let's jump right into section 1 here. So we'll just take a look at the squad and some information. So actually, even though they were allowed to bring 27 players to the squad, that was a decision made in mid-December, raising it from 23 to 27. Mozambique just stuck with 23 players, so they're only bringing that many to the squad. They did publish a 46-man preliminary squad, and so thus they'll have to eliminate half of those players, cut 23 down to the final squad of 23. Let's take a look at the games that they played. We'll look at the November games. Those were World Cup qualifying games, 2 of them in November. The first one was against Botswana, and the second one was against Algeria. We're not really interested in the results there, but in the lineup. And so we're going to, at the end of each position, kind of look and see who filled the positions. That might give us some insight into who's going to be starters. They also played 2 pre-tournament friendlies. Actually, it may have been 3, because I did hear they had a game with the South African club team, Jomo Cosmos, but I don't have any information on that. And in fact, the information I have on the 2 pre-tournament friendlies is a bit less reliable than the information I have for the November qualifiers, but it may shed some light. Those games, those pre-tournament friendlies were against Lesotho and Botswana, so they played Botswana again in the November World Cup qualifiers, and their last I don't want to call it the last because of that club game, but anyway, we will call it the last pre-tournament friendly. Okay, time to move on to our main order of business. That's the candidates, and we'll see who made it and who didn't. So let us begin with the manager. No surprise, Chiquinho Conde, still manager of the squad. He is a kind of a famous player from Mozambique, and he will manage them through this tournament. So we'll view him as having been a definite selection. Okay, on to goalkeepers. So we had one definite candidate in Yvain Rubal. and he was selected for the squad. We had two likely candidates, Iman and Fazito, and both of those were selected. So there's our three keepers. But that leaves the possible candidate, Victor Guambe, off the squad. He was selected for the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. And for some reason, we put the possible but unlikely Gion Chande there. He wasn't selected even for the preliminary squad. So those are our three goalkeepers, Ivan Urubal, Iman, and Fazito. Let's look at the games and see who lined up for them there. So in the first November game against Botswana, it was Iman, sometimes called Iman Siluane, and he may go actually by either name. I've heard Siluane, I think even a bit more than Iman. Anyway, he also started the second November game, so both of those games World Cup qualifiers, as well as the first friendly. That kind of suggests that he is the starter, and I believe that's what we said in part one. For the second friendly, though, it was Urubal who started that game friendly against Botswana. So, that creates a little bit of doubt, but we are going to stick with our view that Iman will be the starter, Siluane there. Okay, that is goalkeepers. Let's move on to defenders and central defense. I think we put the graphics in the wrong place there from part one, so I'll just move them. So let's look at the definite candidates here. We have none, actually. We have three likely candidates, though. The first one is Martinho, the second is Mexer, and the third one is Nene. And the first one, Martinho, did not make it to the squad. A bit of a surprise there. He was selected for the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. And however, the other two, Mexer and Nene, both selected for the final squad. Okay, next we have four possible candidates here. I'll just read through the list here. It's David Malambana, Chamboko, Junior Zainadine, and Francisco Chikamutanga. So not all of those made it. In fact, only the first one, David Malambana, was selected for the squad. Chamboko, the second candidate, and Muchanga, the last one, both of those only made the preliminary squad, and Junior Zainadine not selected even for that 46-man preliminary squad there. So just three selections there for central defense. A bit of a surprise. We can only guess that players from other positions will come in as backups there. Okay, let's look and see what happened with the games there. So we have the first game against Botswana. We have Bruno Langa. We're going to meet him a little bit later. He's a left defender, but he was playing in central defense alongside the ubiquitous Dominguez Palemba. We'll also meet him later. He's usually more of an attacking player. So both of those players out of position, playing in central defense in the first game. More what we expect in the second game. It was Mexer alongside David Malambana. Both of those, the central defenders we just talked about. In the third game, it was, I don't actually have a visual on the third game, so I'm just guessing. I do see Mexer's name on the list there, and I'll leave it at that. It could be that, no, I'm not going to speculate there. My information's not so good. In the last game, though, we have Nene and Amadou. Amadou, we're going to meet a bit later too. So a lot of out of position players there. and hard to speculate on who the starters will be. Really, it just looks like Mexer has the best chance. But anyway, that's why we didn't do a kind of spotlight preview in part one, because it was a bit too difficult to decide who looked like starters. Okay, let's go to left backs here. And here we have Edmilson Dove as a likely candidate. There are no definite candidates here. Edmilson Dove is actually coded as a central defender, but we moved him because he played as a left back more. And he was selected for the squad. The other likely candidate is the one we just met, Bruno Langa. So both of those selected for the final squad. We had a possible candidate in Danilo Muz, and he was not selected for the even for the preliminary squad there. And finally, we had Reynaldo Mandava, who was selected for the final squad. I'm not finding him on my list here. Yes, he was an interesting case. He actually plays for Atletico Madrid, so it's probably the biggest star right now. However, he had played for the national team up until June 2022 and then abruptly stopped. I've actually heard he had an injury, so I'm guessing that was the reason for it. I hadn't seen the injury. Anyway, Reynaldo Mandava was selected for the squad, and given that he was, I would imagine he's going to be the starter there, which is why maybe we saw Edmilson Dove move into central defence there. So 3 left backs, usually it's 2, but 3 probably to cover the central defence position. Let's see who played it in the games there. So in the first game, it was centre back Nene playing as a left back. They tend to move around quite a bit. In the second game in November, it was Bruno Langa there. However, Ronaldo did come in the pre-tournament matches and played the first one, and Bruno Langa there for the second one. So based on kind of club affiliations, you would guess that they wouldn't leave Reynaldo Mandava on the bench, being an Atletico Madrid player, but it hasn't really looked that way in the games leading up to the tournament. So we'll have to see. It seems between Mandava and Bruno Langa there. Again, some of them might move to central defence. Okay, over to the right back position, we had a definite candidate in Domingos Mancanza, and he was selected for the squad. And we also have a bit of a strange situation with Nanani. He was the first of our 2 possible candidates, and he was selected for the final squad, but oddly, he was not on the 46-man preliminary roster. So kind of seems to have been brought in after that, unless there was some mistake in the roster that I had. But anyway, nevertheless, he is selected. The other possible candidate, Boo Januario, I'll try that again. Boo Januario was a possible candidate, but not selected even for the preliminary squad there. Okay, we're almost finished defenders here, but we'll take a look at who lined up as right back. So in the November games, it was Domingos Macanza starting both of those. It looks like he also started the first of the pre-tournament friendlies. But in the last game, the last pre-tournament friendly, where they do seem to use some kind of the B-team players, we have Infran Matola, who we'll meet a bit later. So they're another out-of-position player playing in this kind of confusing Mozambique squad. Okay, let's go on to midfielders. We begin with defensive midfielders. We had 2 definite candidates. The first one, Amadou, and the second one, Shaquille. And both of those were selected for the final squad. We had a likely candidate in Guima, who was also selected. And then we had three possible candidates. The first one, Manuel Kambala. The second one, Quito, also known as Sadang Guambe. And the third one, Keynes Abdallah. So Manuel Kambala, the first one, and the third one were selected for the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. And the middle one, Quito, or Sadang Guambe, not selected even for the preliminary squad. For some reason, we also had a possible but unlikely candidate on the list, Ali Abudo. For the most part, we left these players off the list and promised to introduce them if they were selected. In this case, Ali Abudo was not selected, and I'm not sure why we had him on the list. Let's look at central midfielders too before moving on. And well, let's not, because there are no players listed as central midfielders. Yes, I remember this odd situation where they have only players coded as defensive midfielders. So in that case, we can go and look at the game. I'll talk about the formation. In the first game against Botswana in November, it was a 4-4-2. The other one was a 4-3-2. Sorry, that's a 4-2-3-1. We don't have information for the first pre-tournament friendly, but for the second one, it's again a 4-2-3-1. So we're looking at two central defenders actually in both cases, or in both lineups, two central defenders. In the first one, we have Edmilson Dove, who we met as a left back, and he's coded as a centre back, and there he is playing as a midfielder. We also have Amadou. Sorry, I've got the graphic in the wrong place here. Amadou alongside him for that game. In the second game, it's two completely different players. It's Shaquille and Guima, two of the players on our list there. Both of those selected. I'm just going to skip the third game because it's hard to tell, but I do see Guima is one of the players there. And in the last game before the tournament, again, Edmilson Dove, and this time alongside Shaquille. So again, such a variety that it's hard for us to get a sense of who the starters are going to be. Okay, let's move over to, well, we don't have any players coded as left midfielders and right midfielders, even though they did use a 4-3-3 in the first game. No, they didn't use a 4-3-3. What am I talking about? Okay, so we can move on. Anyway, we don't have any candidates coded as left and right midfielders. So we're going to move up to the, we're now calling it the left attacking midfielder position. It includes left wingers, as in the 4-4-2, and left attacking midfielders, as in the 4-2-3-1. It also includes the left forward and right forward in the case of a 4-3-3, which we don't have in their recent games. Anyway, the first candidate that we have on our list here is Clesio Bok. He's going to be called Clesio, and he was selected. We had him at the likely level, and he was selected. And then we had a possible candidate in Witi. Witi, and I've learned the pronunciation is Witi. He was also selected for the final squad, and we have another candidate who no, I won't get into it. It's a candidate who was selected for the preliminary squad, which surprised us because we had considered him as being off the squad, but because he wasn't selected for the final squad, we won't talk about him. But since I have talked about him so much, I'm talking about Camo, but we didn't introduce him in the first part, and he didn't make the final squad. So two candidates there, Clesio Bok and Wheaty. Let's see what we have in the game. So in the first game, it's a left winger position, and it is Clesio lining up there. And also in the second World Cup qualifier, Clesio playing as a left attacking midfielder. He was on the field too for the first friendly. And for the second friendly. So he's one of the few players where we can pretty confidently say he's going to be a starter there, having started all four of their games and having been only a likely candidate in the first place. But there we have it. Okay, let's move on to the right side. And here we have a lot of candidates. We have two definite candidates. The first one is Gildo Villankoulos. He's going to be known as Gildo, and he was selected. However, the other definite candidate, Paulinho, was not selected, only for the preliminary squad, and not selected for the final squad. But I think we may have kind of overrated his likeliness of making the squad by putting him as a definite. He had only started 6 of their 19 games there, but he was subbed in for 5 and on the bench for 7, and just one match that he wasn't selected for. So no, that does look like the profile of a definite candidate. Anyway, he did not make it to Lino. We have possibly didn't make it because of the many candidates we have here. We have a likely candidate in Geni Katamo. I think it's Geni, but it could be Jenny. He was selected for the squad. And then we had 4 possible candidates. And I'll say right now that all of them were selected for the preliminary squad, and none of them was selected for the final squad. So I'll just run through the names here. The first is Nelson Divrasone, and then Luis Miquissone, Jonathan Muiomo, and Dario. All 4 of those players just making the preliminary squad. We also had a couple of players who were coded as general midfielders. They didn't really have enough caps for the national team for the sources we were using to code them as anything more specific than a midfielder. However, we only had one. That was João Bonde, and he was selected for the squad. But then we had another one pop up, really our only new candidate on the squad here, and that's Alphonse Amade. And he was also selected for the squad. I'm going to introduce him because he was not part of the Part 1 mediacast here. So Alphonse Amade is actually, believe he was born in Germany. At least he played for German clubs, including Hoffenheim, fairly big club in Germany, from 2018 to 2021. In fact, he really only had one game in his 3 years with Hoffenheim. But anyway, that club affiliation is still impressive. And he also played for Oostende in Belgium. Or he now plays for Oostende in Belgium, quite a drop down actually from Hoffenheim. Been with them since 2021. So he had been new to the squad and never appearing for the national team before being named to the preliminary squad. And he made the final squad too. So Alphonse Amade coming in kind of out of the blue for us there. Okay, we move on upfield. No, we don't. We're going to take a look at who started then on the right side as the winger in the 4-4-2 of the first game of November qualification. And it was Guima. Guima, where is Guima? Well, I'm pretty sure we've run into him. I'm just going to try to figure out who we're talking about. Yes, we ran into him as a defensive midfielder. So again, we're kind of getting confused by the shifting around that we're seeing. Okay, so that's Guima, and we have in the second game Gildo lining up, so that's Gildo Vilanculos. He's also called Gildo Lourenco sometimes too, but I think in the tournament he'll just be called Gildo. In the third game, or the first of the pre-tournament friendlies, we do see Guima on the field, but I'm not sure what position he's playing in. So we'll just leave that be and look at the last game where it's Gildo again. So Gildo kind of looking the most likely starter here, although we have to be prepared for an out-of-position player actually taking the role. Okay, let's move on to, well, the forward line, but we included attacking midfielders among them. We're going to change that going forward, but we'll stick with what we got. So we have a no definite candidate, but a likely candidate in Domingos Palembe, a real veteran for the team. He played in the 2010 African Cup and has been with Mozambique since 2004. In fact, if he steps onto the field, Domingos Palembe, at 40 years old, he will be the oldest outfielder ever to play in the African Cup. So Domingos Palembe, a likely candidate and selected for the squad. We had a possible but unlikely candidate in Yude. I don't know why we put him on the list. Anyway, he didn't make even the preliminary squad. So just the one candidate here, and Domingos Palembe. Let's look at secondary strikers before we look at the games. We just had a possible but unlikely candidate in Melvin Choi, and how clever we were to put him on the list because he was selected for the preliminary squad but not the final squad. So again, we usually didn't put players at that level, at that likelihood on the list here. Okay, that is it. Let's take a look and see, because we do have the excuse me, I'm just gonna cough here. Okay, I'm back. So we don't have the position in the 4-4-2 of attacking midfielder, but we do in the 4-2-3-1. In the first game, it was, in the second game in November, World Cup qualifier, it was Domingos Palembe, and I've seen him kind of equally using each name, so you never know what you're going to get. But he was lining up as a central midfielder, and he also was part of the first pre-tournament friendly and the second one as well, lining up as an central attacking midfielder. So it looks like Palembe will be put on the field. I mean, why wouldn't they just put him on to claim that record, right? So I'm pretty sure we'll see Palembe on. But yeah, whether he's fit enough to play the full match or play all games, we'll have to see for the 40-year-old. Okay, we move now to our forward line. And for the forwards, we have a definite candidate in Stanley Retifo, who was selected for the squad. We had no players at the likely level, but then we had 4 players at the possible level. So the first one, Faisal Bangal, the second one, Melky, third one, Isaac Carvalho, and the fourth, Lau King. Well, Faisal Bangal not selected even for the preliminary squad. I believe there was an injury concern there, so that probably played a role. It was a cruciate ligament tear for the 2nd November game, so I'm guessing that's the reason. Isaac Carvalho and Melky, the second and third candidates, both selected for the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. It's Lau King, the only one of these possible candidates that was selected here. We also had a possible but unlikely candidate in Antonio Deo, and he was selected for the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. So there we have it. Those are all of the players. And we're going to move on just to a summary here. So let's begin with notable non-selections. Really just the 2 of them. Martinho, the central defender. We had him as a likely candidate, but he was not selected. Um, Yes, and I think he was the one I had in mind that maybe we had overrated him because Martinho had missed the last 5 matches, so perhaps we should have listed him as a possible candidate. However, the other one, Tellino, genuinely is a surprise. We talked about his participation, missing just one of the 19 games, or selected for 18 of the 19 games in the build-up to the tournament. So a surprise there. And furthermore, I didn't find any injury news about him. I looked for it, but there was nothing. So just simply not selected for the final squad. Surprise inclusions, we have, Reynaldo Mandava. Not really a surprise. Of course, any player that plays for Atletico Madrid is someone you want for the Cup, but he had been off the team since June 2022. So obviously happy to get him back. And again, we suspect that his absence now was due to injury more than any kind of falling out with the team. The other surprise inclusion here is the right back Nanani. Only a surprise because he wasn't on the 46-man preliminary squad. So maybe an administrative mistake there, or maybe brought in at the end. We're not sure. Anyway, we were a bit surprised. The only new player we have here is Alphonse Arnade. Sorry, what am I talking about? Alphonse Amade. And he was brought into the squad there. And finally, for injuries, we only have one that we want to talk about here, a recovery from injury. We weren't sure about Geni Katamo because in the part one, we had him as an injury doubt, but he was selected for the squad. Even for the last 2 games there, he was injured, but selected for the squad. Otherwise, we've mentioned a couple of other injury things, but we're going to move on to the spotlight review. Well, we're not. In part one, we decided not to do it because things were too up in the air. And in part two, we kind of feel the same way. So I'll just kind of generally do it, but we won't actually do one. We do think in goal, the most likely is Iman Siluane. But then we were thrown off by him not being selected for the last game before the Cup. Central defenders, we're not really sure. Well, I'll just talk about the ones we are sure about. We have to go all the way up to the left attacking midfield to Clasio Bach, who started 4 of the games, so we think he's going to be a starter. On the right attacking midfield, Gildo looks like the best candidate there, and in the center, Dominguez Palemba, although he is 40 years old, so we're not sure he'll be starting all the games. And then, we never did actually look at who the forwards were, so let's finish the media cast with that. In game 1, in the 4-4-2, we actually have Gildo and Faisal Bangal. So actually, it looks like he did recover from injury. Must be a bit of a story there, because he wasn't selected even for the preliminary squad after that. In the second game, it was it's our forward, Stanley Retifo, starting that game. So that's probably what we would expect since they only have 2 forwards. Retifo also started in the first of the pre-tournament friendlies. And in the second one, it was Retifo again. So I guess we can fairly confidently say it's him. So in the forward line, things a bit more clear, but especially in defense and central midfield, we're not really dead sure which candidates we're going to see. Okay, well, that brings us to the end. Sorry, no spotlight review today, but we'll have to look at the first game to see who lines up for Mozambique. Thanks for listening. We would like to thank Pixabay and Alexei Ivanov of Mappa Music for the wonderful background music accompanying this mediacast.